Hiya John, lovely to meet up with you at the range on the weekend and do some work on your game. Obviously this first session was just to try and get a feel for what was happening with your golf, provide you with a little bit of clarity in regards to which key pieces you need to be working on to make the golf game, shall we say, a little bit less chaotic than what you've been experiencing in recent times. Reading between the lines, the conversation we had, it seems very much that you've been maybe sort of searching for an answer to something that wasn't really there to be answered. Centred contact plays a massive part in your ability to keep the driver on the golf course. You saw during the session how many shots you were getting out of the heel. Even with decent geometry on flight scope, you were seeing the effects that had on the shot pattern, whereas with an iron the geometry is very similar but the contact's more centred and the irons were taking on a nice shape, particularly towards the end of your session. You're getting that draw back in there. So the key points were relating to trying to get the numbers looking a little bit better on flight scope, and we'll use that in subsequent sessions and build up your understanding and appreciation of the things that you need to do in your golf swing to make that happen and make those numbers better. And also the other thing was to try and just make things, like we said, get you swinging in a way that requires a little bit less work, a little bit less timing, and all in all in a slightly less chaotic manner. So the first thing we had to do was change the setup. You can see here Grant Waite in the top centre of the screen, fabulous swinger of a golf club, and he does certain things at setup that allow him to make a good swing. When viewed from face on, the feet are both flured out, minimum of 15 degrees. You can see there with Grant, it's probably more like 20 degrees with the right foot and maybe 30, 35 with the driver. The positioning of the feet is very important, as that affects the position of the knees, which in turn affects the mobility of your hips and therefore the rest of your upper body during the backswing. So initially what we're seeing here on the top right is we're seeing, or sort of top left, we're seeing very square toes. As a result, we're seeing knees that are pointing slightly inwards, which results in a hip girdle that can't rotate properly during the backswing. So what we've asked you to do here is simply flare out both feet and push the handle of the club forward. So that's the difference between those two setup positions. Feet turned out, handle forward. Now, we explained that on flight scope your plane was shifted to the left and we wanted it to be sort of in line, or if anything favouring a slightly to the right position. So having the handle back allows the plane to be shifted to the left easier. Having the handle forward helps shift the plane to the right. Turning the feet out frees up the hips, making it much easier for your upper body to turn rather than sway. So that's the setup change. What we then talked about was the role of the left shoulder. The lead shoulder, the left shoulder works down, and as the lead shoulder works down, the axis of the shoulder turn is stable. So you can see there the head doesn't move away from that red line as the club goes back. What we were seeing with yourself at the start of the session was a left shoulder that, largely because of, first of all, the positioning of the feet, knees and hips, and secondly to do with trying to trace a line with the takeaway, we see a shoulder turn that moves off that ball very early, and you commented that you've been trying to get rid of that little bump off for quite some while now. So your keys here are turn the feet out, push the handle forward, work the left shoulder down. As the left shoulder works down, the hands and the club head ascend sooner, and the centre of the shoulder turn stays fixed. Now we move this swing on and we see what happens. That left shoulder's working down. Now at this point the left shoulder levels up, and as the left shoulder levels up, you're moved off the ball. So what we talked about was that you were moving the left shoulder down nicely, and you needed to move it down for longer. Not more, just for longer. But that in all is a much better looking backswing than what we were seeing at the start of your session, where the hips weren't turning, the club was tracing a line, left shoulder working across, and we're moving off the golf ball too much. Hips at this point, very level, whereas now we're starting to see a little bit of side bend in those hips, which is great because that's what we see in all good players at the top of the backswing. Insufficient side bend in the hips brought about through incorrect takeaway and incorrect setup will result in level hips and a move off the ball. So feet out, handle forward, left shoulder down were the keys when we viewed it from face on. We then talked about the line on which the club travels during the early part of your swing. In an attempt to keep the club on the line, it's making it difficult to get the left shoulder to work down. So we talked about getting the club to trace a little bit more of an arc during the early part of the swing. So hands in as opposed to tracing the line. This results in a top of the backswing that's a little bit more on plane. You can see there the butt of the club, beg your pardon. The butt of the club now much less above plane than what we're seeing here. And on this one, the club's trying to come down, the right knee's over flexing in an attempt to get the club back on the inside. Still an element of that, but you can see again the shaft now a little bit more on this line as opposed to above this line that we see at the start of your session. Always fighting to keep the club from getting too much above plane. As we can see now, the club staying much shallower, so the club head is here as opposed to here. And if that club gets excessively above that plane line, it's going to lend itself to hitting a shank. So things starting to line up a little bit better coming through the golf ball. And we look at it from face on, just through making a few simple changes. Rather than dropping the head back and tilting the eyes excessively to get the club on the inside. The club's coming from the inside a little bit more than normal anyway. The head still tilts back because it's been conditioned to do so, but it doesn't tilt back as much. The overall position at impact when viewed from face on, greatly improved. Much more forward momentum rather than falling back through the shot. Low point control much better. Just going to get rid of these lines. Sync these swings up for you. Through the ball. So much better through the ball on the bottom left there than what we're seeing on the top left. Ignore Grant in the top centre for now. Feet turned out more, stabilising the upper centre by working the left shoulder down, creating a much better move during the downswing, much less manipulation, club not coming above plane quite as much, not getting out in front of us, if you will, quite as much. Resulting in a much better finish as well. So, a few things that we discussed, obviously, that's why I suggested the 1 hour session to start with. The next session I want to work hard on improving your ability to make centred contact with the driver. One thing I liked particular about this session was how well you stabilised the upper centre once you understood what the role of the left shoulder was. So this first move away here, substantially better than what we were seeing at the start of your session with that bump off. So what we did to do that was, again, just to recap, left shoulder down, feet out, handle forward, left shoulder down, hands in. Good luck with it, and I look forward to working with you again in a week or so's time. Well done.